Welcome back to TNT. We will continue today on our series on complicated grief, a term that you hear a lot, but that is little understood. Complicated grief is not simple to understand, and it's not simple to define. Its simplistic definition is grief that lasts beyond 6 months to 1 year. And we've elaborated on that on our prior video on this subject. So here we are with Riley, who insists on being in this video, but that's fine. So here we are, and we will continue on this series on complicated grief and try to elaborate as much as we can and engage with you on this subject.
I had an interesting point here that I'm curious to hear your thoughts on. Okay. One of the indicators of complicated grief may include having overwhelming, intrusive, or preoccupying thoughts about loss. Can you talk a little bit about your own experience with this?
Yes. Complicated grief oftentimes is a result of traumatic loss, sudden loss, a suicide, an accident, a heart attack, out of nowhere, out of the blue, the rug's been pulled out from under your feet and you've lost someone that's very, very dear to you. It takes a long time, I think. It takes a while for your head to process the reality of your loss.
Right.
The reality of your loss confronts you every day because this person who was in your life, who slept in your bed, who sat at your table and ate, who you snuggled with on the couch and watched TV, whose voice just filled the house, who sat at the piano and played, who went to church with you, went to grocery store with you, called you several times a day when he was at work, sent you silly text messages. All those things stop very suddenly. And throughout your day, you keep missing these things. Even when the doorbell rings or you look a certain direction, you expect to see that person walk in. I expected Daddy to come home just so many times.
Right.
Because my head had come to accept the fact that he was not coming home and that he was gone. Logically, I knew that. But I think there's a big difference between your head accepting it and your heart coming to terms with it.
I remember he used to work the night shift, so we had a light that would come on and stay in maybe until 3 a.m. because he'd be home by then. And when we came home from the hospital that first night, you went to go turn the light off, and I said, no, you can't. Yeah. I knew that he was gone, but I just wasn't ready. I don't think it was for months.
Yeah, we kept that light on for a long time, and even after that light went off, I made sure there was a night light on in some weird way. Just wanted to feel like if he did come home.
His morning alarm
was a hard one.
That one
went off at a specific
took you even longer.
It took me a very long time to shut that one off and let it go. I think I finally did it because it wasn't.
It was hard.
It was hard for you guys. It was hard for me to turn it off, but it was hard for me to see you guys react every time you heard it. So those everyday things just really, really hound you and they overwhelm you. And for your heart to come to terms with your loss takes a long, long, long time. And I think that is where complicated grief really can be defined. It's not what you logically know or don't know. 6 months and a year later, your heart is still dealing with that loss and with that absence. And everything's overwhelming because grief just takes up so much of your energy that you can't process things that most people do, like, what are we going to eat for breakfast? I don't know. What did you eat for breakfast an hour ago? I can't remember.
Right.
Because your body gets selective in what it hangs on to, what it takes, what it burns up energy and your brain cells in processing, because your grief just overwhelms even your subconscious.
Right.
in your sleep, I can't tell you how many times in my sleep I did not remember that my husband was gone. I woke up in the morning, probably opened my eyes just as a continuation of maybe a dream where we were living a normal life, and I just expected to smell the coffee brewing. And it would take me a split second, but for that split second when I woke up, all was right with the world. And then a moment later, the reality of my loss hit me, and I thought, I don't know if I'm going to survive this. So it's very, very overwhelming. And these intrusive thoughts, even if you fight them all day long, it's your subconscious that processes them. Now, is that bad? No, it isn't. It's your brain trying to come to terms with reality and dealing with those memories. You can't just stop every process in your mind and your heart because your loss has occurred.
Right.
You just have to allow your brain and your heart to process in whatever way it does. And God has a wonderful way of allowing our subconscious to bring back memories that we may want to suppress in our wakeful hours.
It's a slight tangent, but I know for me, losing dad so suddenly, the realization that that could happen to anyone at any time, I dealt with a lot of fear that something similar would happen to you. And it took me a while before I guess that fear kind of calmed and wasn't at the forefront of my mind all the time, because especially at that time I was pretty sick. I just had surgery, and I thought, if something happens to mom, how am I even going to survive?
Right.
And
Right.
It had never crossed my mind before dad had died.
Right.
You kind of take life for granted.
Well, we
I
were
think.
young too, right?
Right.
So you don't expect to lose your dad in his 50s.
Right.
I know that I was fully convinced that I would be next. I was
You
quite
were.
sure I would be gone in 3 weeks. Then I was quite sure that I would be gone in 3 months. And that's not for any other reason except that I thought if it could happen to him, it could happen to me.
Right.
And I just was extremely suspicious of God's motives. What are you trying to do, God? If you're out to destroy me, you're out to destroy my family. I was concerned that something would happen to you guys. Every time you got in the car and drove off somewhere, my heart just skipped a beat, and I thought, dear God, please don't let anything happen to them. So a preoccupation with death is common part of complicated grief as well. You're afraid that death will visit you again in a very intimate and traumatic manner.
Absolutely.
And that comes from a total sense of helplessness, right? You realize,
It does.
wow, this is one area of my life I can't control.
Right.
And it's so unpredictable.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I remember, I think I knew 2 other people who lost a brother or another family member within a week of dad dying. And so just the reality of how fragile life is,
Yes.
and they were all unexpected, car accident or whatever.
Right.
And that definitely compounded the fear.
Oh, it drives home the point.
It really does.
Really drives home the point.
It really does. Now, I know you can talk to this point. One hallmark characteristic of complicated grief is feeling like you no longer have a purpose after loss. And I know for you, this was a much harder thing to deal with after dad died, because he was your husband. So it changed your identity more drastically than it did mine, because I, continue living, start a family of my own. For you, this was your everything. This was your.
So your identity as a daughter doesn't change with the loss of a father.
Correct.
You look forward to things in your life and in your future down the line that originally did not include your father anyway, right? So yes, you wanted him to be at your wedding, but he's not a part of your marriage.
Correct.
You wanted him to be around when you have children, but he's not a part of your
part
nuclear
of my
family.
Everyday.
Yes.
Correct. Yeah.
So there would be things that you wanted him to be there, but those things in life will happen with or without him.
Right.
As they are. Right?
Right.
So in my case, losing a husband, I had already traversed those events in life. The dreaming of the future, dreaming of being married, having children, raising a family. I traversed all of those with Dad for 29 years. And for me, the idea of looking forward to the future always included him. I knew at some point one of us would bail out on the other. I didn't expect it to be that soon.
Right.
And for some odd reason, I didn't expect it to be him. I just thought I'd be the first one to go.
Really?
Yeah.
Huh.
And maybe it's because I had some, very scary, life-threatening moments,
Right.
in the few years leading up to his death. So I always had to accept the reality of my own mortality. And I remember even saying to him, this could have taken me out.
Right.
And had it taken me out, I don't know that you would have survived. So you're going to have to learn to survive when something happens to me. So I put him in training to survive losing me. Never for a minute thought I would lose him.
Right.
So when I look at the future and I dream of the future, at that stage, it was so difficult to see myself as anything. I was not a wife anymore.
Yeah.
I'm still a mother, but that's going to change. Like, it never changes the fact that I'm a mother. But
we
y'all
move
are
on and live
adults,
our own
yes, and you
lives,
were
right.
already adults, and you will
Right.
move on in your life. So my identity was not that rooted in that. Now, if I had
Right.
young kids, I would know that for the next 5, 10, 15 years, my identity would be rooted in the fact that I'm their mother and playing the role of the father as well.
Right.
So you latch on to that identity, and it gives you your purpose. I couldn't figure out what my purpose was.
Right.
And sometimes even now I think, wow, I just live my life for myself.
I know one of the things you said was hardest is that the early years and even the early decades of marriage, you put in so much work. And then at this point, we were in our early 20s and looking at flying the coop. And this was kind of the phase of life you were looking forward to just enjoying with Dad. And you put in all this work into your marriage and building and preparing for a future. And suddenly you didn't have anyone to share it with.
I don't have anyone to share it with. And, you really want to share it with someone that you're comfortable with. And if you've spent 29 years with somebody, you're comfortable with them.
Yeah.
You know all their bad habits and their good habits. They know all your bad habits and good habits. And you've just learned to smile about them and not get worked up about them or just ignore them. And you've just learned to be comfortable with each other.
Right.
And that takes decades of investing in a relationship.
Right.
And so you crave that you put in all of that work. And this season, I wanted to be able to share with him and reap the rewards of all of our decades of hard work.
Right.
So that, that's hard. That's hard. So I still struggle with the identity issue in terms of anything relational, because now my identity, I've come to accept it and as me and whatever I do and whatever that looks like. And if it's my ministry, it's me doing my ministry. There are so many times I thought, gosh, I wish Daddy was here doing this with me. And then I thought, I wouldn't be doing this if he was here.
Right.
Because I wouldn't know a thing about being a widow.
Right.
So that's another aspect of complicated grief. I hope it has helped you. We still have more to discuss in our next video, so stay tuned. Thank you for joining us on this episode of TNT.